I almost didn't go. That's the thing I keep telling people when they ask me about that day. I almost stayed home. My feet hurt. The tube was packed. I'd been standing outside royal events for years, and honestly, after a while, even the most historic moments start to blur together a little. You get desensitized. You forget, sometimes, that what you're watching is real. But something pulled me out of bed that morning. I don't know what it was exactly. Maybe it was the date. Maybe it was the fact that I'd been in London the week Elizabeth died. I remember standing outside the palace gates then too, watching complete strangers hold each other and cry. Men in suits weeping openly. Teenagers who probably grew up not caring much about the monarchy, suddenly, desperately, laying flowers they'd bought from a corner shop. There's something about grief that strips people down to their most honest selves, and I'd seen that happen on these very streets once before. So when I heard the memorial unveiling was happening, a permanent sculpture to be revealed near St. James's Park, close to the old ceremonial walkways she'd walked 1,000 times, I set my alarm for 5 in the morning and told myself I'd just go for an hour. I stayed for 6. London in early morning has a specific kind of quiet that you don't get anywhere else in the world. It's not silence, exactly. The city never fully sleeps. There are delivery trucks, early joggers, pigeons that seem personally offended by your existence. But there's a softness to it before 8 o'clock, like the city is still deciding what kind of day it wants to be. I walked from Victoria, pulling my coat tighter against an April chill that had no business being that sharp. The sky was doing that thing it does in England, where it can't make up its mind. Pale grey on one side, a thin blush of amber on the other, and in the middle, just a kind of tired white. My breath came out in small clouds. A woman ahead of me was pushing a pram, moving fast, like she had somewhere to be, and I wondered briefly what it must be like to live here, to just walk through all of this history on your way to a grocery run. I turned onto the mall and stopped. I don't care how many times you've seen it. That road, wide and red, flanked by those enormous plane trees, the palace sitting at the far end, like it's been waiting for you specifically. It gets you every single time. There's a gravity to it. Something that makes your chest do a small, involuntary thing. And that morning, it was already crowded, not chaotically, not like a football match or a concert, more like a slow tide of people. Families from abroad with their matching backpacks and wide eyes. Old women with Union Jack scarves who looked like they'd been attending royal events since before I was born. Young couples who'd clearly come as a sort of date, the kind of event you bring someone to when you want them to understand something about you. Groups of school children in high visibility vests moving in wobbly lines, teachers at the edges doing that anxious head count thing with their eyes, and among all of them, standing very still near a section of temporary barriers that had been erected overnight, were the security personnel. Plainclothes and uniformed. You could tell the difference if you knew what to look for. The way the plainclothes ones positioned themselves with their backs to walls, the way their eyes moved rather than their heads, the way they never quite relaxed even when they smiled. The uniformed officers stood at intervals, not rigid, but alert, ready. I found a spot along the barrier about 40 meters from the covered sculpture. It was draped in a heavy gray cloth, enormous, maybe 15 feet tall, and even hidden it commanded the space around it. People kept glancing at it, like it was already something. Like even its shape under the covering was trying to tell you something. I got talking to a man beside me. His name was David. Retired school teacher from Nottingham. He told me come down on the train that morning with his wife, who had gone to find coffee and had been gone for 20 minutes, which he was trying very hard not to be worried about. He had a paper program for the event folded in his jacket pocket. He'd been to the funeral. He told me, in person, queued for 14 hours. I didn't think I was a royalist, he said, almost to himself. I've argued against the monarchy at dinner tables. I'm not ashamed to say it. But when she died, he trailed off, looked at the covered sculpture. She was the constant. You understand? My whole life, through everything, recessions, divorces, the whole mess of being alive, she was just there. And then she wasn't. I understood. We stood quietly for a while after that, the kind of quiet that happens between strangers when something too large for small talk settles over a conversation. Around 9:30, the energy shifted. It's hard to describe the way a crowd changes when something is about to happen. It's not one person reacting. It's more like the whole organism of people adjusts simultaneously. Heads turn in the same direction. Phones rise. Voices drop. The children who'd been fidgeting suddenly stilled, sensing something in the adults around them. At first, I thought it was the ceremony beginning, but it wasn't. The police motorcycles came first. You heard them before you saw them, a low processional rumble that separated itself from the ambient city noise. Then the vehicles, dark, long, moving slowly through a cleared corridor that hadn't existed 5 minutes ago. And then I heard someone near me say very quietly, "He's brought the boy." I had to stand on my toes. The crowd had thickened in those last few minutes, pressing gently but persistently toward the barriers. I could see the vehicles had stopped. I could see the doors opening. Official figures in dark coats moved with practiced precision. That specific kind of movement that happens around important people, the slight choreography of protection. And then King Charles stepped out. I've watched him for years. Watched him be the prince who waited, who gardened and painted watercolors and talked to plants, and bore the weight of being perpetually, almost king with what seemed like remarkable patience. Watched him give that first painful address after his mother died, his face doing that thing, that very English thing of trying to hold itself together while something enormous moved beneath the surface. He looked different that morning. Not older, exactly, though he is. Different in a way I couldn't quite name. More settled, maybe. Like someone who has finally, after a very long journey, arrived somewhere and is trying to understand what arriving actually means. He wore a dark coat, a single flower. I couldn't make out what it was from that distance on his lapel. He paused on the pavement outside his vehicle with the particular stillness of a man taking a private moment in a very public place, his hands clasped briefly in front of him. Then he turned, and he reached back into the vehicle. A small hand came first, and the crowd, all of it, hundreds of people, made a sound. Not a cheer, not quite, something softer. Something that came from somewhere genuine. A collective exhale of recognition, of feeling. Prince George stepped out onto the pavement of London on a grey April morning, and he looked honestly like a boy who understood exactly where he was and was doing his very best to be equal to it. He was wearing a dark suit that fit him perfectly. Someone had made sure of that. His hair was neatly combed, though there was one piece near the crown that had already begun to drift free, and something about that one imperfect strand made the whole scene feel suddenly terribly real. He looked up at his grandfather. Charles put a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. Not a grand gesture, just a hand, the way a grandfather does. They walked together toward the ceremony area. I realized I had completely stopped breathing. David beside me had his hand pressed flat against his chest. "Right," he said softly. "There it is. Here's the thing about seeing a future king as a child, standing beside a current king at a memorial for a queen. It compresses time in a way that's almost violent. You see 3 reigns in a single frame. You see the past, Elizabeth, her reign, the whole century of her present, only as the thing being remembered, the cloth-covered form, the reason for all of this. You see the present, Charles, bearing the crown as best he can, trying to honor what came before while carrying what comes next. And you see the future, standing there with one strand of hair out of place, doing his best." George didn't perform anything. That's what stayed with me afterward when I turned it over in my mind. He wasn't performing solemnity. He wasn't performing duty. He was just present. Looking at things with a child's directness, the sculpture, the crowd, the officials moving around him, the cameras he'd learned long ago to neither seek nor avoid. He leaned slightly toward his grandfather once, said something close to his ear. Charles listened, nodded slowly. Whatever was said, it was theirs, and I think that's the thing that got to me most. In a day of public ceremony, of history being made and recorded and photographed from every angle, that small exchange, a boy speaking quietly to his grandfather, a grandfather listening, was the most private thing I saw, and somehow standing there behind a barrier in my coat with my aching feet and my borrowed mourning, I felt like I'd been trusted with something, not by them, exactly. By the day. By the strange, complicated, imperfect institution that brings people like David from Nottingham down to London on early trains. By grief, which has its own generosity, the way it keeps reminding you that things matter. The ceremony hadn't even started yet, but it had already done its work on me. His name, I found out later, was Corporal James Whitfield. I didn't know it then. Nobody standing near me knew it. To the crowd, he was just one of the ceremonial guards positioned along the inner perimeter, tall, immaculate, his uniform the kind of dark that seems to absorb light rather than reflect it. He stood at his post perhaps 20 meters to my left, facing outward toward the gathered crowd, his expression the practiced blankness that those guards perfect through months of training until it becomes something closer to a superpower. He had been standing there, I later learned, for almost 3 hours before the ceremony began. 3 hours in April cold, without moving, without adjusting, without letting the noise and press of the crowd, which by mid-morning had become genuinely dense, shoulders touching, children on fathers' shoulders, tourists with arms extended holding phones above their heads, without letting any of it touch the absolute stillness he carried inside his body like something sacred. I noticed him because of a child, not George, a different child. She was maybe 4 years old. Red coat, blonde pigtails, slightly lopsided. The expression of complete absorption that small children get when they've identified something that interests them and have decided the rest of the world can wait. She had wriggled her way to the front of the crowd near the barrier, the way small children do, finding gaps that adults can't see. And she was staring at Corporal Whitfield with her entire face. Her father was behind her, one hand extended, the classic parental hovering that happens when your child is near something they probably shouldn't approach. But he was also, I noticed, watching the guard, curious himself. The girl reached the barrier and put her small hands on the top of it, pulling herself up slightly to get a better view. The guard didn't look at her. She tilted her head, studied him. The way children study things they find genuinely puzzling with a kind of solemn scientific interest. She said something. I was too far away to hear it. Her father leaned down and whatever he told her, probably some version of they're not allowed to speak. Sweetheart didn't seem to fully satisfy her because she turned back to the guard and studied him again. Then she did something that made the people immediately around her laugh softly. She waved at him. A proper wave, arm extended, full hand motion. The kind of wave you'd give to someone at the end of a platform as a train pulls away, generous and deliberate. A wave that said, I see you and I want you to know I see you. Corporal Whitfield didn't move, not his eyes, not his jaw, not the set of his shoulders or the angle of his chin, nothing. The girl considered this response, or rather this non-response, with apparent thoughtfulness. She dropped her arm, looked at her father, looked back at the guard, and then, apparently deciding that the problem was simply that she hadn't tried hard enough, she waved again, even bigger this time. There were maybe 30 people in that small section of crowd who were watching this unfold, and I could feel the collective warmth of them, the slight leaning forward that happens when something unrehearsed and genuinely sweet is occurring in front of you. Someone behind me whispered, "Oh, bless her," in an accent that placed her somewhere in the north of England. Whitfield didn't move. But here's the thing, and this is the part I've tried to describe accurately whenever I tell this story, because I want to be precise about it. Something shifted in his face. It was almost nothing. A lesser degree of tension maybe around the edges of his mouth. Not a smile, not close to a smile, but the absolute zero of his expression became, for just a fraction of a second, absolute zero plus something very small that I couldn't name. The girl saw it. I'm certain of it, because she stopped waving and she smiled, and she turned to her father with the satisfaction of someone who has just decoded a difficult puzzle. But that's not the moment that stopped everything. That came about 40 minutes later, when the ceremony was in its second phase. The official addresses had been given, brief and appropriately formal, voices amplified across the gathered crowd through speakers that were good enough to carry the words clearly, but not so polished that they erased the feeling of being outside in the real world, with wind occasionally moving through the sound. Charles had spoken, quietly, as he tends to. There's nothing bombastic about him. He's not a man who fills a space by expanding himself. He fills it by somehow drawing the space toward him, making you lean in. He spoke about his mother in terms that were careful and real. He didn't reach for the enormous things. He talked about her consistency, her sense of duty as something she'd worn not like armor, but like skin, something she didn't take off. He said she had shown him, over 70 years of watching her, that service wasn't sacrifice, that it could be, if you let it, the thing that made a life make sense. I watched George during this part. He stood slightly behind and to the right of his grandfather, and he was very still. His hands were clasped in front of him. the same posture as Charles, I noticed either learned or inherited. He was looking at his grandfather's face as the words came out, and there was something in his expression that I found almost too much to look at directly. The particular attentiveness of a child who is absorbing something for later, filing it somewhere. Understanding that this moment is the kind that gets carried forward, he was 10, 11, somewhere in there, old enough to know, old enough to feel the weight of a name, of a lineage, of being George, great-grandmother's portrait on his father's money, her voice the one that read the Christmas speeches, her era the water he'd been born swimming in without ever choosing to enter it. Old enough to feel all of that and still stand there, still keep his hands clasped, still look at his grandfather with something that wasn't performed respect, but actual respect, the harder kind, the kind that comes from watching someone closely for years and deciding for yourself that they are worth it. Then a man in the crowd did something stupid. I want to be fair, I don't think it was malicious. I think he'd been there a long time, was frustrated by his view, and made a poor decision quickly without thinking through the consequences. He was large, maybe mid-40s, wearing a dark green jacket. He'd been shifting around near the barrier for a while, trying to see around a temporary camera platform that was blocking his sightline to the sculpture. At a moment when the attention of the security personnel was distributed across the crowd during a brief transition in the ceremony, an aide moving toward Charles with a document, a small ripple of movement near the official area, the man in the green jacket reached over the barrier. He didn't touch anyone, he didn't lunge, he just leaned, extended himself past the barrier by maybe 2 feet in an attempt to get a better angle for a photograph. His phone was out. He was trying to capture the sculpture, or possibly George, or possibly both. Corporal Whitfield was moving before I fully registered what had happened. Not running, not the dramatic sprint that you might expect from something you've seen in films. Something more efficient than that, a swift, gliding repositioning that covered ground at a speed that seemed inconsistent with how unhurried it looked. Within seconds, he was at the barrier, his body interposed between the man in the green jacket and the interior of the ceremony area, and he was speaking to the man in a voice low enough that I couldn't hear the words from where I stood. The man pulled back immediately. Hands up, the universal gesture of "I mean no harm, I made a mistake." Nodded vigorously. The guard spoke again. The man nodded again. 2 uniformed officers appeared at Whitfield's flanks as if they'd materialized from the air, and between the 3 of them some wordless communication occurred, and then nothing. The man stayed where he was not removed, was simply, clearly, quietly put back in his place. The whole interaction lasted perhaps 15 seconds. Most of the crowd nearest to it saw it. The ripple of awareness spread outward, the nudging of elbows, the whispered, "Did you see that?" the craning of necks. But by the time most people understood something had happened, it was already resolved, and the ceremony continued its pace without a single public acknowledgement that anything had occurred. I looked at George. He had noticed, of course he had. Children notice everything, especially the things adults are trying to pretend haven't happened. His eyes had moved briefly to the disturbance and back. His posture hadn't changed. His hands stayed clasped. And there was something in that, something in the composure of a child who has grown up surrounded by the possibility of disruption and has been quietly trained to hold his ground through it. That was, in its own way, as moving as anything his grandfather had said. I spoke to a woman afterward. She'd been standing about 10 feet from me throughout, and we'd exchanged a few glances during the memorable moments, the way strangers at significant events do, developing a brief, wordless companionship through shared witness. Her name was Patricia. She'd emigrated from Jamaica in 1974, she told me. She was old enough to remember Elizabeth's coronation on a neighbor's television, which was a luxury back then, when the whole street came over to watch. She had complicated feelings about the monarchy. She was explicit about this, and I respected the directness. She said she'd come today not for the institution, but for the woman, for what it meant to her parents and her grandparents to write to the Queen and sometimes receive a reply, for something she couldn't fully articulate but felt was worth standing in the cold for. The boy, she said, meaning George, as we watched the official party beginning to move toward the covered sculpture. He looks like he knows. Knows what? I asked. She considered it. What it costs, she said. I didn't fully understand what she meant in that moment. I understood it later. I'm still, if I'm being honest, working out the full shape of it. The sculpture was still covered. The moment of unveiling was coming. You could feel the whole crowd gathering itself toward it, that same collective tightening that precedes something you've been waiting for. The official party was in position. Charles stood directly before the draped form, George beside him, their shoulders almost not quite touching, and Corporal Whitfield was back at his post, 20 meters from me, facing the crowd, perfectly still. The little girl in the red coat had been lifted onto her father's shoulders at some point, and now sat there, head and shoulders above most of the crowd, looking toward the sculpture. She'd apparently forgotten about the guard, but I kept glancing at him. Because here is what I kept thinking. This man has been standing in this cold for hours. He did his job a few minutes ago without drama, without recognition, without anyone in an official capacity acknowledging it happened. In an hour, he'll be rotated out and someone else will stand in his place, and the crowd will not particularly notice the transition. His name won't be in any of the reports about today. The photographs will show the king and the prince and the sculpture. They will show the crowd's faces lifted and open and moved. They will not show the man who made all of it possible to happen safely. I don't say this to diminish the ceremony. I say it because I think it's the truest thing I observed that morning. That the whole structure of what we call duty, the thing Charles spoke about, the thing Elizabeth apparently embodied, the thing George is being slowly, carefully formed to understand, runs on people nobody sees. The ceremony ran on time. The crowd was safe. The king and his grandson stood together before the last great monument to the woman who had defined an era. And Corporal Whitfield stood at his post and watched the crowd and breathed the cold April air and gave nothing away.